Hey Team Bio, welcome to your quick screencast on Introduction to the Human Heart. So we've been talking about cellular respiration, and remember that cellular respiration is all about breaking down glucose, C6, H12O6. We're combusting glucose and oxygen, and we're making carbon dioxide and water. And the oxygen that is combusted and the CO2 that is produced are both gases. And we need to get these gases, we need to get oxygen in to all of our cells, and we need to get CO2 out of all of our cells. And the cardiovascular system is the system by which we are helping transport oxygen and carbon dioxide around the body. So we're going to be talking a little bit tomorrow in class, or I guess Wednesday in class, about the structure of the human lung and the capillaries where gas exchange is taking place. But today's screencast is about the structure of the heart, which is the pump that is moving the blood around. Okay, so that being said, I'm going to use two different colors today. I'm going to use blue, and this blue is representing blood that is CO2 rich and O2 poor. And then I'm going to be using red, which is representing blood that is O2 rich and CO2 poor. Okay, and then we're going to be talking about the heart, and it has two sides. It has a right side. Sorry, make that a little neater. And a left side. But you'll notice that this is actually the left side of my screen and the right side of my screen over here. So why do we call this side of the heart the right and the left side of the heart? Well, imagine this heart is in somebody's body. If you were looking at it, this would look like, the left side and the right side, but to them, this is what's on their right and this is what's on their left. So imagine that this heart was in somebody's body. This side would be closer to their right arm and this side would be closer to their left arm. So we refer to it in the directions that are relative to the person whose heart it belongs. Okay, so there are two major loops in the human system that blood is traveling back to and away from the heart. So one is called the systemic loop, and that's transporting blood from your body to your heart, and the other is the lungs loop, but it's not called that. What is that called? Oh, the pulmonary loop. Well, I'm not going to write that down. But let's start with talking about CO2 rich, oxygen poor blood that is coming from your body and going back to your heart. So it's just been, this blood has just traveled around your body. It is coming back to your heart to get pumped to the lungs, and it is bringing back blood that is CO2 rich and oxygen poor. So there are two veins. Two major veins that are dumping into the heart. They are called the inferior and superior. Inferior, and then this one is called the superior, but it's on the other side. Inferior vena cava, and this is the superior vena cava. And one is not better than the other, it's just on top of the other. So the superior vena cava is bringing blood from your upper body and your head back to your heart, and the inferior vena cava is bringing blood from your torso and your legs back to your heart. And these two veins dump into the waiting room of the heart. It is the right atrium. So your heart has overall 4 chambers, 2 atria, and 2 ventricles. This is the right atrium, and blood pools and fills up in the right atrium, and then empties into what's called the right ventricle. So blood is going to move from the right atrium into the right ventricle, and there's a valve here. It's called the tricuspid valve. And it's called that because it has like 3 little parts that come together, 3 cuspids. So what's going to happen here is that the right ventricle is, blood's going to come in through the superior and inferior vena cava, fill up the right atrium, and the tricuspid valve is going to be open, and so it's going to flow into the right ventricle. And the first thing that's going to contract when the heart beats is the right atrium is going to contract and fill up the right ventricle to the tippity top with blood, and then the tricuspid valve is going to slam shut, and the right ventricle is going to contract following the right atrium and shoot blood up into what's called the pulmonary artery. The pulmonary artery divides into 2 pretty quickly. There's a section of it that goes off to the left and a section of it that goes off to the right, and it's leading to the lungs on either side. So you have 2 lobes to your lungs, and the 2 sides of the pulmonary artery are bringing blood to your left and right lobes of your lungs. So you can remember veins and arteries. Veins are always returning blood to the heart, and arteries are always taking blood away from the heart. The pulmonary artery is the only artery in the body that has CO2-rich blood and oxygen-poor blood, and that's because it's going away from the heart to the body, or sorry, to the lungs. So here, in the lungs, the CO2 is going to be dropped off into the lung space, and oxygen is going to be picked up. So when blood returns to the heart, which it's going to do through the pulmonary veins, which come in here and then also here. So here are the pulmonary veins. Now, the blood is oxygen-rich and CO2-poor. So the blood, just like the other side of the heart, the right side of the heart, the blood is going to pool in the left atrium, and it's going to fill up the left ventricle. The blood's going to fill up in the left ventricle. The heart, the atria are going to contract. They're actually contracting at the same time. The left and right atria are going to contract simultaneously. They're going to fill up ventricle, and then the right ventricle contracts, sends blood to the pulmonary artery, and the left ventricle contracts and sends blood to the aorta. The aorta is going to split off pretty quickly. Actually, even before we get to this structure called the aortic arch, there are a series of arteries called the coronary arteries that are the blood supply of the heart itself. So the heart feeds itself oxygen-rich blood first. Smart organ. The aorta splits off quickly, and some of this blood is going to go up to your noggin, and a bunch of it is going to go down to your extremities. And then here is the descending aorta down here. Okay, so, I guess the last structure that I forgot to, this valve here is called the mitral valve. Fun fact about the heart, I don't know why this is recording, is that the sound that you hear, the kind of lub-dub, lub-dub, lub-dub sound, is the lub sound is the mitral and the tricuspid valves both closing, and then the dub sound is it's the sound of these closing, and then backflow of of a little bit of blood hitting the back of the valve. And then there's also valves in your pulmonary artery and your aorta that between the ventricles and these two arteries that snap shut, and that's the dub sound. The aortic and pulmonary valves closing, and then blood flowing back and hitting them. So if you have a heart murmur, it's when your heart, the valves in your heart are not closing properly, and some of the blood is flowing backwards in the direction that it's not supposed to be going when your heart contracts. What are other kind of fun facts about the heart? There's a node in the heart. It's called the SA node, and it's up here in the heart that creates the electrical rhythm that causes the heart to contract. And sometimes that node can stop generating a regular rhythm, and you can shock it back into place by giving it a little electrical zap. And so that's what a pacemaker does. It monitors the electrical signals that are happening in your heart, and if they get off, it gives it a little zap and resets it. Other fun facts about the heart, it's a little hard to see here. This is not a great drawing, but the right sides of the heart are actually much skinnier than the left sides of the heart. So the muscle here around the left side is much thicker, and that is because the blood that is moved by these two sides of the heart, the right side only has to pump blood to the lungs, which is really close to the heart, so it doesn't have to be that thick or that strong. Whereas the left ventricle has to pump blood up to your head and then down to your toes, and then that blood also has to come back. So the left side of the heart is thicker and has a stronger, more, what's it called? Shoot, it's been a long time since I forget. I'll look it up and talk to you about it in class, but it's basically the amount of blood that's sent out of the heart with every heartbeat. Okay, yeah, so the heart is a giant pump, and it's got kind of cool structure, and that's all. See you in class tomorrow.